So the Packers just beat the Cleveland Browns 23-10 in their first preseason game. And I want to go through and touch on my biggest takeaways from this game. I'll touch on Jordan Love, his very short appearance in this game, touchdown to Wicks. I want to talk on the running back battle because I think after this game, it has me having some questions when it comes to A.J. Dillon versus Emmanuel Wilson. We'll also touch on the guy who I think had one of the best performances in Grant Dubose, wide receiver. And then I'll also move to the defense, talk about the safety battle and some other players who really stood out in today's first preseason game for the Packers. And if you guys are new here, you want to stay up to date with all things Packers, I cover the Packers only on this channel. I have a second channel where I cover the rest of the NFL, which is linked at the top of the description. So first off, Jordan Love did play today. Matt LaFleur had made that clear earlier in the week that he would be at least, taking some snaps out there on the field. And it was a very, very short day for Jordan Love. After handing it off to Josh Jacobs, who had 1 carry for 7 yards, Jordan Love threw a beautiful, just perfect touchdown pass to Dontavian Wicks, a 65-yard touchdown pass to Wicks, who had his guy beat deep. Jordan Love just puts it right there. We've seen him do it. Beautiful deep ball, and that was it for Jordan Love. And so I think that when it comes to the preseason, I think you want to play your guys a little bit just to knock that rust off, but it seems that Jordan Love didn't have any rust to knock off, and so he's pretty much perfect. I think he had 158.3 passer rating on 2 of 2 for a little over 65 yards because that touchdown pass was 65 yards. So I think we all believe Dontavian Wicks is going to take even more strides forward this next season. The Packers have a plethora of wide receiver options, and we saw that there. Beautiful Jordan Love touchdown pass. And then now here's where I think is the most interesting thing from this game, and it was watching the running backs. So A.J. Dillon was the guy who, after Josh Jacobs had 1 carry, Dillon comes in, and it wasn't great. 4 rushes for only 2 yards. You do have to take into account that when the offensive line was blocking for A.J. Dillon, to be completely honest, they weren't really doing their job. There were tons of guys in the backfield. There weren't really any open holes, but A.J. Dillon still was not able to really maneuver his way out of there. There were no holes, as I said, only 4 rushes for 2 yards. But then Emmanuel Wilson came in, and he had a really, really nice day. I've always liked Emmanuel Wilson. I think that anytime we've seen him, he's been pretty productive. It's been a very small amount of times that we have gotten to see him in the preseasons over the past couple seasons and last year. But Emmanuel Wilson had 13 carries for 67 yards, 5.2 yards a carry. He definitely, in this game, looked better than A.J. Dillon. He also had 1 touchdown. And for A.J. Dillon, the Packers, of course, brought him back on a really cheap deal. And honestly, I am debating if I think Emmanuel Wilson is a better player than A.J. Dillon. And I just wonder if the Packers would really be willing to move off of A.J. Dillon, because with Marshawn Lloyd being a 3rd-round pick, the Packers drafted this year, they're not going to cut him. He has been dealing with injuries. He left this game with a hamstring injury, and so hopefully it's not too serious. But to keep Emmanuel Wilson, the Packers would probably either have to let go of A.J. Dillon or Marshawn Lloyd when it comes to the 53-man roster, and I don't see them releasing Marshawn Lloyd. So I really am debating. I feel like Emmanuel Wilson is a better running back than A.J. Dillon. I just think that with A.J. Dillon, he's had, early in his career, I think he looked more explosive. This year he came in, and he was in much better shape. Now, I do think we have to take into account that the offensive line was not blocking well. But still, I think that Emmanuel Wilson, from what I've seen, is able to do more when there's less in front of him than A.J. Dillon has been able to do over the years. And so that is something to watch the rest of camp. I do think that A.J. Dillon could be a better in pass protection, because Emmanuel Wilson in one of those snaps sort of got pushed back almost into Sean Clifford. So that could be a factor. You also add in the fact that A.J. Dillon has so much experience in this offense, and I just don't know if they'd honestly be willing to move off of him. But I am thinking that Emmanuel Wilson may be the better running back than A.J. Dillon, in my opinion. And so we'll see if that continues in the next couple preseason games, and if A.J. Dillon will get more carries. But he's clearly ahead of Emmanuel Wilson. He got the start there, or he got the snaps after Josh Jacobs left. But it's something I'm contemplating. Emmanuel Wilson looks like a really, really solid running back. Marshawn Lloyd had 1 carry for 8 yards, looked really nice, and then he left with a hamstring injury. So it's not a good sign that so far he's dealt with a hip injury, now a hamstring injury. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Now, the guy who I think had one of the most exciting games was Grant Dubose, who was the Packers' 7th-round receiver last year, dealt with some injuries. But he came in today, had 5 receptions for 66 yards, and he seemed to be pretty wide open, ran some really, really nice routes, had a beautiful catch, toe touch with Sean Clifford out there. And there had been a little bit of buzz from Dubose. Matt LaFleur had talked him up a little bit this camp. And I just don't think it's a good idea for the Packers to cut him when it comes to this 53-man roster. I think another team may be willing to pick up Grant Dubose. And so I think it's risky if you decide to cut Grant Dubose. The question is, with the amount of receivers the Packers have here, with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, that's 4. Then you have Bo Melton and Malik Heath. Bo Melton had a rough day. I think he dropped 2 passes, maybe 3. Wasn't a great day for him, but I think he proved some stuff last year, and so I think he'll make the roster. Malik Heath, that would be the 6th receiver. And so would the Packers keep 7 receivers if Grant Dubose, if they think Grant Dubose has done enough to push himself in there? I don't know. I am debating if Grant Dubose is better than Malik Heath. He just looked really good out there. It is a preseason game, and of course, they're not facing the top talent necessarily. And so I do think you have to take some preseason performances with a grain of salt. But he looked really, really good out there. I think the Packers need to keep him on this roster. And so if they also want Heath, I think they need to keep 7 receivers. Will they do it? I don't know, but I think it's risky to let Grant Dubose go. Now to the defense. Lucas Van Ness coming into his second year, I think that he's going to break out in another kind of way. He had 3 tackles for loss and 1 sack, looked really, really dominant out there. And Devontae Wyatt also had a really, really great game, was getting consistent pressure out there. The Packers' offensive line looks pretty dominant. And then moving to the safety battle, we've seen in training camp Javon Bullard and Evan Williams, also Anthony Johnson Jr. a little bit, taking those starter reps next to Xavier McKinney. And so it's been more of a battle than I thought it would have been, with Javon Bullard being a second-round pick. Evan Williams has really done a lot this camp, and both guys looked really good in this game. Javon Bullard had a lot of plays where he flies around. I think it's what you want to see from your safety. He flies around, plays hard, plays tough. It's what I think we saw from him coming out of college, but he really showed up today in a big way. As well as Evan Williams, he led the team, or tied the team, with 6 tackles. And also forced a fumble. He also looked good. Just from this game, I think Javon Bullard is the better player. He just has a little bit more juice, in my opinion. I still think Evan Williams is really, really good. But I'm going to guess that Bullard does win the job. Bullard did start next to Xavier McKinney, so that is interesting to note. In the first game, Bullard does start next to him. But both of those guys played really good, so that's a very, very good sign. And then a few other players who sort of stood out. Aaron Mosby, who is pretty far down the depth chart, but he played really well on defense. He consistently had some splash plays. And now back to the offense. When it comes to the offensive line, Zach Tom was not playing, and first-rounder Jordan Morgan was out. The starting line was Rasheed Walker, left tackle, Elton Jenkins, left guard, Josh Meyer, center, Sean Ryan, right guard, and then Andre Dillard gets the start at right tackle. I think that Jordan Morgan will have that right guard job when he comes back, because in camp he had been playing ahead of Ryan for a few days before he got injured. And then Dillard gets a start over Caleb Jones and Kadeem Telfort. So that's just interesting to note. That offensive line, when A.J. Dillon was running, I think it was mainly that group. Maybe they added a couple guys in. But Dillon, as I said, the offensive line was not blocking great, and so that does have to be a factor there with A.J. Dillon. The second offensive line was Dillard, Newman at left guard, Sean Ryan center, Monk at right guard, and then Telfort at right tackle. And now to Sean Clifford, because there is a competition, I think, for the second quarterback job, Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt. Now let me pull up Clifford's stats from this game. He went 10 for 19, 111 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I think he was okay in this game. I don't think he looked great necessarily. He had some nice plays. He had some pretty inaccurate throws as well. He's a pretty wild quarterback, much different than a Jordan Love. But I don't know. I don't know if he did too much for himself in this game. He had some nice throws. There's no doubt about that. He just seems to be pretty inconsistent, in my opinion. Michael Pratt only came in near the end of the game. He went 5 of 7 for 46 yards. So not too much to go off of here in a preseason game. But honestly, just off the eye test, in my opinion, what I was seeing, Michael Pratt seems like he's going to be a better quarterback in the long run than Sean Clifford, if I had to guess. Sean Clifford seems like a more wild-type quarterback. Michael Pratt seems like a little more polished. His arm seemed a little stronger to me in a couple throws. Threw some really accurate balls in a tight coverage. One of them was a drop, I believe. But in my mind, I think Michael Pratt looks better. We'll see if the Packers think that, if they want to push him ahead of Clifford. Clifford does have more experience. He's been here a year longer. He has struggled a lot in camp with interceptions. But as I said, I think Michael Pratt looked better, in my opinion, on a few less snaps. And then I'm just looking through these stats here to see if there's anyone else to touch on. Jarvian Howard, another running back, had 8 carries, 44 yards. That was near the end of the preseason game. So as I said, with these, some of these guys you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt, but I think that the battle is between Emmanuel Wilson and A.J. Dillon. And today, Emmanuel Wilson definitely looked better. He did have more opportunities. And then Joel Wilson, tight end, had 3 receptions, 30 yards, not too bad. Julian Hicks, 1 reception, 23 yards. Malik Heath, 2 receptions, 22 yards. Outside of that, if we look at defense, Isaiah McDuffie had a few nice plays, 4 tackles. Raylan Goforth, 6 tackles. Christian Welch, 6 tackles. And so, Kalen King also, 7th round corner, had one really, really nice tackle near the end of the game, had 2 tackles total. So that's pretty much my thoughts from this one. A fun to have the Packers back watching, even though it's a preseason game. Team USA winning the basketball Olympic final. I had that on in the background, but I was definitely more focused on this Packers game. But that's pretty much it for today. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.